is Light. I am a technical writer, also a community developer. I do run podcasts called Let's Talk Technical Writing, where we talk about everything technical writing and your career around that, even how to transition to developer advocacy as well. If you want to even have conversations around that right now, we can have that while they're actually, just running some things. Oh, cool. All right, let's begin. So let's take you to Gemini API. So first things you need to have in mind when thinking about Gemini API or even an AI in terms of Gemini API is what we call generative AI. So what is generative AI? I'm going to try and explain this in a simple way, as simple as possible. Generative AI is a part of AI that produces data, that outputs data. In this case, text, right? It outputs data based on the information that it has and the information that it's been trained on. Next, another thing. So one area of generative AI we're going to talk about for this session is what we call LLMs. LLMs are called large language models, and it is a generative AI based off of language, meaning conversations, text, all those kind of data that have to do with language. Now, the way this model identifies this language or these words when you are like putting in inputs into these models is what we call tokens. So what we see as words to you, right? This model see it as tokens. And the way it's able to interact with you, understand what you're saying, is what we call patterns, right? It sees these patterns and then try to predict and understand what you're trying to say so that it can give you a more accurate answer. So that's how AI works in a sense, right? Next slide. So I did a prompt, I tweaked it a bit to have a conversation around music. I did not specify if it was going to know a lyrics by Burna Boy, but apparently it did. When I asked it just did this, and I was like, oh, nice. So it's in music. I mean, vibe, right? I also asked it a question around code, and it already has an idea of what I'm trying to say, and it already predicts the next thing that code is supposed to output. So modern LLMs are large, right? They are like the knowledge you have. It has so many informations. You right now as a human being, I mean, if you could write down all the knowledge you had from when you were born till now, I don't think it to be more than this room, to fill this room and the other, right? So they are quite large, right? Because even having a conversation, there's a lot of information that actually allows you to process conversations that we have, right? So this is not just limited to just normal conversations, but also classification, summarizing. So it's more like summarizing conversations, translation, analyzing information, and then classification based on different, context. Next slide. So LLMs let us prototype fast. They allow us to prototype fast because they're quite creative in the way they output data. And an example of this is asking it to give you 5 neat ideas for a science fair project. You could try that now. For the lady that asked earlier that she doesn't use ChatGPT. Back, please. Yeah. So this is just an example of what Gemini AI can do in terms of giving you ideas of any questions you asked it, but it's based off of the information it has. I want you to keep that in mind while we're having this talk. Next. So why are large language models different from other models out there? Well, first of all, they can perform tasks that are not present in other smaller models. So smaller models, they're actually built for specific tasks, right? But large language models are just it's like a room of information where you just need to ask it a question, and then it goes through all the information it has to kind of make sense of what you're trying to ask it and gives you the best answer from that question. So you could ask it anything about biology or music or art or travel. Because it has all those informations, it's able to understand a pattern from that conversation you're having and give you that information. Another is it's more interactive. So you're speaking to it in English or any language, but more conversational. It feels like you're talking to a person. So that's why LLMs are actually really great. And another thing is also that they can scan through large amounts of data. They can even receive large amounts of data for to get better understanding of what you're trying to say or questions you're trying to ask it. Next, please. Okay, so another thing to keep in mind after generative AI is multimodality. What is multimodality? Multimodality is just a way of receiving these data, right, in other forms of data, meaning videos, text, audio. So I'll give you an example of what multimodality is. I would just say, okay, a few days back, I needed Gemini to explain what was in a picture, right? So I just uploaded an image and said, okay, how many cats are in this picture and what are the types of cats? And then it gives me an output that, okay, these are 4 cats, and then it gives me a little bit of information about what those cats are, right? So what I just did is multimodality. I provided an image, and then it's able to understand that through still tokens. Everything's are tokens. So it's able to transfer that and convert that into a token, understand what that image is about, and then give you an output. And it's also not limited to text. It can also provide images and text and other forms of media. So just like the way we generate image through our AI apps that we have out there. So you can call those apps multimodal, or those AIs multimodals too. Next slide. So welcome to the Gemini era. We're taking you to that, to that roadmap of everything else. Next slide. So Gemini is kind of broken down into 3 parts. Next slide, please. So into 3 parts, we have the Gemini Ultra, the Gemini Pro, and the Nano for the Android users. And it's been broken down into 3 ecosystems. So we have the Gemini API that you use, you have on your Gmail and your basic Google apps, right? You have AI embedded in them, general ones. So that's like the one for consumers, like you and me, right? And then we also have the Gemini API, which is the one I'm going to tell you about, which developers use to build their own apps and make it a bit more smarter. And then we have the one for businesses. And the one for businesses is Google offers what we call the Vortex AI. It's partners with Gemini API to make a more advanced system. So you can do more with it, and you can integrate it with cloud. Allows you to kind of build your own AI, in fact, So that's the structure around what Gemini does right now. Next slide. So how can I get started with Gemini API? So you can get started with Gemini API. You can get started with Gemini API by checking aistudios.google.com. So Google has this very, very user-friendly app called AI Studios. There you can actually generate your API key that you use for your project. You can create prompts, test them, and save them. You can also customize the models. And lastly, you can generate starter codes based on those prompts that you already saved. So you don't necessarily need to be an AI expert or a model expert. You could just try building your own models and tweaking it to your own needs, and then generate code from it and push it straight into your projects and get started quite faster than usual, right? Next slide. So this is how the interface looks like, right? We have at the top left is where you can generate your API key. Next slide. Here is where you specify the version of Gemini API. I think mid this year, we had the Gemini 1. Gemini 1 allowed you to, for Gemini 1, they kind of broke down the models into, I think, two different versions. There's the one for image, and then there's the one for text. So, but the new one, Gemini 1.5, allows you to, let me just say, it's multimodal, right? It's multimodal. So you can specify the type of version of Gemini you want to use while you're trying to, create your own prompts and save your own prompts. Next, and then this is like the interface where you actually play around with things. I think here I told it to give me an ingredients, like the ingredients to preparing this. I can't really recall, but yeah. And lastly, next slide. There is where you generate code. So once you've created your own prompt, right? Your own project, and you played around with the prompt to kind of tailor it to your own needs. What you do is you go here, you save it. Once it's saved, you go here and get your code, and it can also be in various languages. So this can be in Python. Next slide. This can be in Python, JavaScript, anyone you use generally. And there are also, next slide, libraries around. It's all good. There are also libraries around the languages you use. So if you are someone that is using Java or Python, there are libraries available, for you and Gemini API. I don't know what's going on with my slides, but it's all good. Next slide, please. So let's talk about usage patterns. What does this Gemini API, offer? What can you do with them? So we're going to talk about a few things here. Next slide. So we're going to cover something I cannot see apparently, but I can at least assume I know where it is. We're going to talk about code generation, basic prompting, search, retrieval information, image understanding, and tuning. Next slide. Next slide, please. Okay, so basic prompting. Let's talk about that. So, basic prompting is just the way it is. You are inputting information and asking it a question, right? Just dropping a prompt. It could be any word, a question, or asking the AI anything. It's just a prompt. And I did a prompt to give me write a prompt about the current price in Nigeria, and it was like, as nation grows, a price too high, for fuel that drives, that makes us fly. The palms rent tongues, a cruel display. As pockets shrink with every day. My pocket is shrinking every day because of this. But yeah. So this is a basic prompt and a response. This is just an example of that. Next slide. And next is also in terms of code. Now, there's one thing I want you to keep in mind, right? When you tell it to generate a code on something, it might give you an output, right? Some people might have that issue of you're asking it one question, but it's giving you that same answer. It might even be different question around that same topic, but it will give you that same answer or something just repetitive. And there's a way you can go around that. And we call that few-shot prompting, or what we call structured prompting. What is few-shot prompting or structured prompting? Structured prompting or few-shot prompting are just prompts that you give an example to. So I'm having a conversation with you. I say, okay, write an essay about a dog and a cat, but I want you to start with a dog and then a cat, and then you just give an example of something. Because you have that example, you already have an idea of what I'm trying to say. So obviously, you're going to write something similar to it. That's what it is. So you're just giving it an example of what you want it to answer you, or how you want it to answer you. Next slide, please. So this is what I mean, right? I make a question of, okay, generate a certain code and giving an example of it, but I provided an example of what that should look like, and then it's going to say, okay, since you've given me an example, this is how I want it to output. Most of my representation is going to be on Python. So sorry about the blurry screen and all. Next slide, please. So this is how it looks like on Google AI Studios. So there is the topic and then there's the tips. So same way, but this is just like how it looks like on AI Studios. Next slide. So we have a model that allows you just have a one-way conversation, and the model is called the text interface, right? Text model. So that one, you just go in and drop a simple prompt and then just output a simple answer. But if you want to take that a step further, more like a chatbot, we have the next one, where it is called the chat interface. So that one is more like, next please. That one is more like you have a conversation, it gives you an answer, but you can ask a follow-up question, just like a normal chatbot. Next slide, please. Okay, let's talk about code generation. So Gemini API can generate codes for you with just normal conversations, right? And one of them is, next please. Next please. So that is also data. Next please. So I can ask you to generate data of all the countries and capitals in certain countries, and it will give me that. And then it can also do that in SQL. Next please. So you can also generate SQL query. Next please. So this and execute it. Well, you are going too fast. But yeah, so it can generate SQL queries and then execute them. So if you don't want to go through the hassle of seeing an output of something, right, you can ask it a question, tell it to generate it, like run that code for you, and then give you an output of how that will look like. Next, please. So let's go to search and information synthesis. Next, please. So there's one thing I want you to keep in mind. AI cannot assume they know everything. In fact, I cannot assume I know anything. I don't know everything. I don't know every single thing about AI, right? But I want to know about them. And the only way I can get them is if someone gives that information to me, or I look for it online, right? And if you're going to ask the AI a question that it does not know about, how would you do that? The only way to do that is to bring your own data, to present your own data to it, so it can go through it and understand what you're trying to ask it and give you a more accurate answer. So they don't have every information, and it cannot provide facts. Lastly, they do not have access to private data. So you will have to be the one to provide that information to the AI. Next, please. So, an example. You give it an instruction, give it more context, which is the information, and then you ask it questions based on the information you provide. So, it's just pretty easy. Next. So this is an example of how that would look like on Python, where I call in and specify the Gemini AI I want to use. Next is I provide it with a document, and then I asked it question about that document, whereby it will actually now give me my own answer. So this is just an example of what I mean by bring your own data. Next, please. So if a use case in this scenario is I have a course and I'm supposed to write maybe an essay about a particular topic in school, yeah? And I need this AI to give me like a summary about what it's all about, or let me write it for me, right? So what I'm just going to do is I'm going to get all that topic and send it like a document to the AI. It's going to go through it, and then it's going to give you an answer based on that. So I have a question for you guys. I'm going to, so the Gemini 1.0, right, has 30 tokens. Remember I said everything is a token. Every conversation, every text is a token. It counts it like tokens, right? Who here knows how many tokens that ChatGPT has? Let us use them. For example, do you know? Show of hands. Nobody. Okay. So who can guess how many tokens that Gemini 1.5 has? Just a guess. You can guess. Okay, how many? 150. 150 tokens. That's too small. Like if 1.5 already has 30,000 tokens, just try and think about it. 450k. Ah, mad. Well, you're close. But let me tell you how many tokens. Okay, wait, how many? 2.5. You're close. Let's find out. Next slide, please. My slide is not even showing the thing, but it's fine. So, previous slide. So, they actually can run up to 1 million tokens. Up to 1 million tokens. So, this is an example of a tweet by Jeff Dean. What he did was, he gave it like a big book, right? Like this big book. Gave it to the AI and say, you know what? Read through every tiny thing. And remember, all these words are tokens. So if I say, my name is Light, that would be like maybe 30 tokens right there. So imagine what a million can do for free, right? Because you are playing around with the AI Studio. So they give you certain tokens to use and like test and create your own prompt with. So he tried it and he did give it all those information and asked it one question from that whole book and was able to accurately give that answer. So that is actually a big deal. There was supposed to be a video that talks about the impact of what that 1 million tokens can do. In the next slide. Next, please. Okay, so that video is not available. It's okay. So yes, so Gemini 1.5 has up to 1 million tokens. Remember, everything is a token. And the context may be more flexible than retrieval augmented generation. We call them RAG. Who have any idea what RAG is? No idea. Okay, so let me just give you a simple idea of RAG. I have I want to tell the AI that I have a bug in my house, right? But I'm a developer. I'm probably not maybe a janitor, right? It doesn't know that. It just assumes that I am. But I don't really have any information. I've not given it any information about what I do, things I've been doing in that house. And then I say, oh, okay, I have a bug in my house. And then it gives me, oh, okay, I have a bug, use an insecticide. But if I want it to understand what I'm saying, right, I give it something like a bring your own data. But you're not exactly putting it in the AI, right? You're not putting it in that AI. What it's going to do is you're going to merge a library with the AI model itself. So the model kind of just marries that information and gives you information based on that. So when I now say I have a bug in my code, it doesn't show me a bug, an actual bug on my code. It understands that I have an error in my code. Does that make sense? Okay. Next, please. So image understanding. We all know that Gemini AI or even AIs understand images as long as they are multimodal. Next slide, please. Okay. So, I wanted to block this. I wanted to assume the name of this. But what comes to mind when you see these two images? What comes to mind? Next slide, please. This is not fair. I want them to assume. But yes, Home Alone. Next, please. So, same things I've been saying about tokens. Tokens are like everything is a token. Images, videos, text, they are all tokens to these LLMs, right? So they can be used for instruction, contents, or query subjects. Like I said, you can provide an image and then ask a question about it. So it just sees everything as a token. Next, please. Next, please. Next, please. So Here, there is supposed to be an image here, right? And I was supposed to ask it question based on an image. So this image was supposed to be a very vague drawing of a wizard. And I wanted my AI to give me its stats just based on that image. And this was the stats it gave, which was pretty weak. They could kill this wizard in any minute. But in the next slide please, I then provided like an information of an application form, and I wanted it to generate a JSON data, right? Output a JSON data based on this document. Next, please. Next, please. So many blanks today. But it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. And it's so black, and my name is light. It's supposed to be white. Okay, go back, please. One more slide, please. Okay. So there was one thing I was supposed to even talk about, since the slide is closed, but I'll just have the conversation with you about it. So there's something that happens when you provide it an image, right? It could be a document, and you want to convert it to code. For example, I have a list of attendance, right, in a piece of paper. Maybe I want to know the amount of people that came for the day, and then I take a picture of it, and I want it to convert it to code, like a JSON data where I can actually connect to my code and it can log it directly. What it does is it will give you that JSON data, but if you do not specify one thing, which I talked about, it might give you the wrong information. What could that be? Yeah? So I have a list, right? I have a list on I have a paper with an attendance form, right? And I want it to generate a JSON data. Do you get me? But I don't know how it's going to respond. It might not be very accurate. I want it to respond in a certain way. What do you think I need to do for it to give me exactly what I want? The way I want it. Yeah, I'm bringing my own data, but what type of data? I said it earlier. Few short prompts. Giving it an example. Simple. Yes. So you're just giving it an example. So if I'm going to drop an image like, oh, nice. Thank you. Next slide. Next slide. Please, ladies. Next slide. Thank you. So yes. So this is an example, right? And I want it to bring something like this. I'm going to give you an example of how I want it to output. Next slide, please. So let's talk about tuning, the final thing. Now, next slide, please. One thing about tuning, I'll just leave it there. One thing about tuning is we've already known that these AIs can be quite vanilla in what you want because they cannot assume for everybody. They don't assume what everybody knows. Do you get me? So what you need to do is what we call tuning. Now, tuning allows you to bring your own data, but in a structured way. And one way to do that is when you want it to understand a certain type of data, right? You can create a list of examples. Remember, few short prompting allowed you to make examples. But how many examples can you provide in that prompt? Guess. 200. Yeah, you can even make up to 300 examples. But you know the downside of that? Okay, let me tell you the downside of that. When you are providing that kind of information, when you are putting too many information in one prompt, it can slow down the process. It can slow down even how it's going to answer you. So the way to do that way faster is what we call tuning. So tuning is having that example, but put it in a document, and then you upload it for the AI to go through and understand, oh, okay, I know what you're trying to say from all these examples. So next slide. Here's how it looks like on the AI Studio. So here you go to create new tool model. You import your examples, right? In this point is your structured prompts, right? Next slide. Once you've uploaded it, you click on, next slide please. You click on tune, and once that is done, it actually studies that and understands, that information you've provided. It gives you a chart of how long it takes to process it if you want a bit of those nerdy informations. So if you want to know more about tuning, you can go to Tuning Quick Start Guide on any language actually, not just on Python. Next slide, please. So last thing I want to talk about is responsible AI, right? So Google has this thing we call responsible AI, and the point of this is to make sure that, one, it is being used right, it's being controlled, because there is a good side of using something, and there's also a bad side of using something. But the only way to make sure that we are on the good side is to make sure that we use it responsibly. And even when we are using this AI, right, on our studios, you might get restrictions. But if you want to play around with that restriction or lift those restrictions, you actually just go to, there's a place in the settings that allows you to actually just reduce or navigate all those information. So you can just say, okay, I don't want it to be too sensitive to words that I want it to say. I want it to be more creative with my answers. Next, please. Yeah, and if you want to know more about it and get started, just go to ai.google.dev to get started. Thank you very much. Any questions for me? Okay, sure.
Okay, so the question I have is two questions. Number one,
okay.
My own question is the makings of the AI studio. Is there a specific language? Is it something that anyone can just come, create a model, train the model to be more useful to him? Or do you need to have experience with a particular programming language? That's one. Then I've had somebody asking if it's free, so might as well just chip it in.
Okay. So first question is, if I'm correct, a particular language, right? If it's specific to a particular language, no, it's not. You could actually build it with Python, with JavaScript, with Kotlin. There are various libraries there for you, available for you. So you can actually generate code, any code that is available. I don't know how many, right? But I know that it's a lot. And it's the general one we mostly use. And second, yes. So Google gives you a certain amount of token to play with. I don't know if it's daily. I don't know if it's weekly. But there is an amount that is set to you to play with. You get me? Yeah. You have a question? Okay. So that's I hope that answers your question. Yeah, that's a good question, though.
Good afternoon. My name is Toby.
Hi.
Yeah, so my question is this. When you spoke about image processing,
Yeah.
and that's when I started to ask myself, for the image processing, you said about tokens.
Yeah.
So I was like, for the images, does it break down the image to its pixel level and start to take each pixel as a token?
So, with my technical understanding and understanding of technical things, yeah. Remember I talked about patterns, right? So what I think it does is it breaks down this, not into pixels, but I will not say into pixels, but I would say like the way image recognition does, right? So I feel like it breaks down all those little pieces, kind of put them together to understand what this image is about. So if I am saying, oh, take a picture of a car, first this is black, right? Then it looks for a logo, right? Okay, Toyota, okay, it looks like the structure, what model this is, all those little information, and it just logs all of them, and then try and find a pattern around that. So if you're not asking what year is this, it might just give you suggestion on, okay, from all this data I have, I think this is it. So I feel that it analyzes that image, break it down into like different tokens, and then try and understand, information around that. Yeah, good, thank you.
Hi. Let's say, for example, I'm using my personal data as context for the AI, and I want it to only answer questions based on my own data. How would I fine-tune it so it doesn't so people can't just call in and ask random questions that doesn't have to do with the data I provided it?
So I feel like the studio, right, is private to you, right? It's private to you. It's not public. It's just going to be like your own private account where you can play around with things. Now, if you want to use that and you bring it into your project externally, right? I feel there will have to be another form of infrastructure that if it's going to be another user that is using it, you're not going to make it open for everybody. Let me give you an example. If you are just going to create a I'm just going to let me just go to the educational part, right? I want to have all the information of all the students and lecturers in school and what they do and what they are up to, right? That's a general question for everybody. Everybody can go to that website and see, like a Google search, who is handling this topic? How do I get started? But if you then provide your your personal data on, okay, how many kids this man have, what are their names, what is his house address, and you put it in the the general directory where it's located, right? And you tell this AI to read it, it will probably give everybody. But if there's a way to control that, maybe by creating separate accounts and giving users control over what kind of data they have, and then I think that would be a good way to go around that. Yeah. I hope that kind of answers your question.
I wanted to say that instead of people, so for example, what I was actually trying to say was that, let's say someone comes in, let's say for example, I wanted to really provide answers for my company, but someone can come there and ask, like, for example, a coding question, and it might still want to answer it. Like, how would I safeguard it so it doesn't answer random questions that people might have, but only answer questions that are specific to whatever my business is doing?
That's where you train it. You have to train that prompt to do that. So you create that level of restriction. I do not want it to give anybody else this type of information. I only want it to be the information I provide around this. And the AI should understand that. So you are tuning that. You are trying to train it. Yeah, that's where training comes in. Any other question, please? Okay.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Emmanuel Aliyu.
Hi, Manuel.
My question is pretty simple. You said something about image understanding and that the image has to be multimodal or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm looking for more information around that condition. What kinds of images can AI understand and what kinds doesn't it understand?
So I'm going to be very transparent. I feel it understands everything it sees. I mean, it's every image has, like, if you see an image, right? Have you ever seen an image you don't understand? Let me first ask that.
Abstract paintings, for example.
Then it will tell you it's an abstract painting. That's the only thing I understand. Literally, because it's an intelligence. It's the information it has and understands that it's going to still give out. So I want you to assume that it's not like this vague supercomputer. In fact, it's not even supercomputer until you train it. Do you get me? Yeah. So I feel like there's no limit to what it can understand as long as you can train it. Oh, yeah. So this, okay, let's answer one more question. If you have one more question.
Good afternoon.
Yeah.
So we mentioned something about your AI being trained
Yeah.
for it to like use it for certain things, right?
Yeah.
Now I'm coming from an aspect of like in academics. For us, there are things that are objective and there are things that are subjective. 2 + 2 is equals to 4. It's not equals to 5. But if I'm training my AI and it's getting information from different people, if somebody says 2 + 2 is equals to 5, somebody else says 2 + 2 is equals to 4. Since it does not have any method of identifying I'm just using that as a scenario. Obviously, you can run like mathematical algorithms and get the answer. But I'm saying like, it does not have any method of identifying which one is the objective answer. How they can I be sure of the response it's giving me when it comes to academic writing?
Okay. I want to ask for a use case, right? 2 + 2 is not equals to 4 in every topic, right?
Yeah, fair.
So if you specify that topic and say, okay, under maybe algebra or something,
I'm listening.
it's 2 + 2 equals to 5.
It should still be equals to 4 algebra.
Exactly. But if there's other topics around that answers that question, I
Yeah.
think you need to specify that.
True. But I'm saying like, since we are training it based on like responses that every other person is giving, and it is constantly learning.
So based on responses that every other person is giving.
Like, let's take Gemini AI as an example.
Okay.
Right. For it to get to this point where everybody can use it and it is versatile in answering questions,
Yes.
you have to train it with like conversations, responses, information from different sources.
Yes.
So when it comes to like research in academics,
Yes.
some people have a certain idea. There's a school of thought here. There's a school of thought here. There's a school of thought here. That particular thing is subjective. I might choose to believe one school of
Yes,
thought.
I get what you mean now.
So how does the AI acknowledge which one is the right school of thought. Like, I don't know.
That is, you're actually doing a research together, because I do not know how to do that, but I have an idea.
Okay, I'm listening.
The idea is separating the source of where that data is being collected. So the source of that academics
Would determine the response. Thank you very much.
You can take your idea to the networking session. All right, please, a round of applause. Thank you. They do not want to leave, and you all do not want to eat. Okay, so right now we are going for